Good afternoon. Wanted to talk really about Incoterms. We hear a lot about Incoterms, and I've noticed when we ever post anything on Incoterms, it's a real subject that confuses people. They're not quite sure which Incoterm to use, and obviously I've delivered Incoterms so many times now since the 2020 update. Obviously, lots and lots of businesses and international as well, working with the ICC. Delivered recently in Saudi and other countries. So obviously, this is not just unique to the UK. One of the big challenges you have with Incoterms is that it's confusing. It's where does that risk stop and when does it finish? And one of the biggest challenges is sales, because sales are the first point of any contact. So they're the first point of the contact by the buyer or the opposite way around, and then who decides on the Incoterm, which is always the most misinformed, or we use an Incoterm that we're not quite sure what it is and agree to it because we want the sale, or we sign a contract and we're not quite sure what contract we signed. So just put some slides here together and I'll just explain them. So Incoterms are strategic commercial instruments, not just shipping terms. They can leave you vulnerable, and they can leave, they go wrong, they can cost you very heavily as well. We've certainly seen that with Brexit. When Brexit happened, a lot of people went down this crazy DDP route or X works and all these other terms that really don't fit, they're not really fit for purpose in the modern way we trade, especially. And one thing I want to get very clear with everybody today is that we're going digital. You know, whether we like it or not, trade is going to become digital in the next year or so. AI is a huge, powerful tool. We use it ourselves. We're seeing the benefits already of using AI. We've created some programs ourselves. But what does that do to you as a customer? It really starts to look at your data. And if you get that wrong Incoterm and that data's in there, it's going to cost you a lot of money, or it's going to delay goods being shipped, or it's going to delay things being stuck in places. But I think what it will do, it will stop all this nonsense that you have at borders. It'll alleviate that because the goods won't even ship before they're approved. So again, there's a lot of things to start thinking about as we move on with the modern kind of way we trade. And it's something that's coming. We're not going to be able to change it. But when we're doing sales, where does it sit? It sets to understand that commercial. So sale comes in, if you agree your sales, your negotiation, and what does the sales guy do? He wants a nice, easy route and nothing on sales. So hey, this includes me as well. We want that quickest sale. We want to get the sale. So do we think about all the things behind it? Yes, I do, because obviously I'm in compliance now, but we don't really think. So we get the sale. We don't really think what we agreed. And then all of a sudden we've gone from sales to contracts and we've not really agreed that Incoterm. Then the Incoterm's put into the contract and then transport. And then it's normally passed down. We call it the jigsaw effect. It's normally passed down to the shipping department, who have said, oh, God, why have we got this term? Don't care. We've got it. Got to look after the customer. And then all of a sudden you've got all these challenges if you're doing DAP, where you promise to get the goods to a customer by a certain time within your contractual agreement. You've got DAP there. It's your obligation to get it there. And you're not meeting that obligation. You get fines and all sorts. Or you get the opposite, where you're doing X works and you're expecting the customer to come in. You've done the deal and the customer doesn't come and collect it for whatever reasons, and there's challenges there because you haven't been paid, and there's all things. So the sales negotiation and commercial terms, we go to contract, transport's arranged, customs, it's kind of that format, and it can be quite messy. So the choice of Incoterm really depends on how you're selling your goods, and again, who takes the liability, because once them goods have left you, if you're doing things like letters of credit, or you're dealing with a customer you never dealt with before, and he's come and collected your goods, what do? You haven't got a clue. You know, once it's gone, it's gone. You know, you try getting your money once it's gone and been picked up. Well, I'll stop it. Well, how do you stop it if you don't have the control over the transport? He could have used anybody. So again, it's understanding the Incoterms to really safeguard your way forward. So it's very important. And because obviously I'm from a sales background and obviously I'm an Incoterms trainer, I can give you them kind of things to talk to you from a sales point, not from a compliance. And this is how you do it. And this is the only way you can do it, because we all do things differently. We all do things the best way we can, because ultimately we're here to make business. One of the critical areas, I talk about this a lot, X works, usually the risk is choice for sellers, because you put in all the risk, even though you don't understand it, it's collection from your premises, which is great. And CEOs and directors love it. Well, it's collected, it's not my concern. Well, bet your bottom dollar when you get an audit and HMRC wants to start seeing all your records and you can't get them, and then you suddenly get a fine for 30 or 40,000 pounds. That's when you suddenly realise that X works isn't really the term I should be using. What do you do with your VAT? How can you prove that when you're doing zero VAT, where them goods have actually been delivered to? What if it's controlled goods? How do you know where the goods are going to? So there's lots of things to think about. So it's very complex. So be careful when you agree into Ex Works. Ex Works purely means collection from your premises. What does that mean? That means that you have no obligation to do anything apart from have the goods ready, obviously suitable, packed, and goods ready. You'll then do a commercial invoice, zero VAT. Your customer will come and collect it. He'll do his own entry. How do you know what money he's putting on that commercial invoice if you don't get a copy? He doesn't have to give you a copy. He's not obliged to give you a copy under his contract. So again, why would you do Ex Works? I never understand for life how people do Ex Works, but they do it, and that's up to them. That's their choice. We're not here to dictate or tell people what you can and can't do. But you run huge risk with VAT exposure, customs audit, because you need to be able to prove your exports. And most cases, when there's a traceability back on an Ex Works, you'll be the exporter record anyway. You might not have the documents, but you will be the exporter record on them documents. And if there's valuation and transfer price and all sorts in there, you have a legal responsibility to make sure you're fully aware of what's happening to your export of your goods. So again, it's something just to be conscious of. Incoterms contracts, they don't do payment terms. When payment is due, currency methods all excluded from Incoterms. Title transfer. But remember, once them goods have moved, it's very hard to get your goods back once they've moved. Penalties, damages, consequences for late deliveries. It's what's in your contract. So if you've agreed DAP, what is in that contract under your DAP? Because an Incoterm is for the movement of the goods from your premises to the delivery of the buyer. Who takes that responsibility is your Incoterm, but in your contractual agreement, what have you put in there? If you've signed a contractual agreement, I've seen some horror stories over the many years of doing this, and I won't obviously push too much into it. But you can ask these people who've been, in a position where we're talking hundreds of thousands of pounds, where it's in the air and nobody knows how to control it. So again, it's understanding them controls. Governing law, so which country law applies to disputes? So again, do you understand that? What agreement have you made? When you're shipping to places around the world and you're doing container work and you're sending it over to India or the US, well, why don't you just send it to the port and let them then deal with it from the port like we would here in the UK? I never understand why people deliver it to the door. That's it, and create so much extra work. You don't know what the obligations and regulations are in that country. And you're taking a huge responsibility and you're relying very heavily on the freight forwarder. And the freight forwarders do a great job, but they don't know everything. They know they're there to service your goods being moved. They're not there to be holding your hand and do all your documents and everything else. Yes, they'll do the best for you, but they have no legal responsibility. So responsibility for that, and they'll be working on direct representation too anyway. So direct representation, they'll take a responsibility, but you will take the hit. So be under no illusion there. They certainly won't be doing indirect where they're showing the cost or showing the responsibility with you. Again, dispute resolution, I put on here the fundamental principle in terms define delivery, not ownership. It's all about from A to B. Who, if they get damaged, if they get lost or whatever, who takes that responsibility? If there's lateness, what's in your contract, what you've agreed to? So again, it's very important when you're setting up if you're new to exporting and you get a purchase order in, you should be checking that purchase order. What Incoterms are agreed, but in that purchase order, remember, if you've agreed to DAP, or let's just say you're doing a letter of credit, another thing to consider, and you're a sales guy, and they want them goods delivered to their premises in 10 days, well, how are you going to do that by container if it's across, halfway across the world? It's going to take them 20 days and you've agreed to 15 or 10 days, and is the penalties involved in that? Or letter of credit where you've agreed an X works. I have no idea why somebody would do that. I'm sure your bank would stop you doing that. But again, if you have, and them goods have left, how do you control that? So again, it's understanding your risk when it comes to your Incoterms. Just going to talk about X Works again. Like I said, it's a high risk for sellers. A lot of people use it. I understand why, because it leaves a lot of issues because it's your cost. So your cost is from your premises, but it's later time when, from a compliance point, when you've got to explain that FCA is a much stronger control, and the difference between FCA, your factory, and about very important. FCA has two meanings: FCA factory, which is fee carry from your factory. So what that means is that they will collect from your factory, but you'll be responsible for loading the vehicle. You'll be responsible for doing the export declaration, but you must be very clear where that collection point stops. Because if you're doing things like air freight, they may say FCA airport, might say Heathrow. So remember, if that's the case, when you're taking them goods down to Heathrow, you're that responsibility. So if anything happens to them goods, it's your responsibility. Once you've unloaded them and once the airport has taken ownership of them or the carrier where you send them, that's when then the risk is passed to your customer. But if it's from your factory, FCA, FCA is once it leaves your factory gate, the risk then passes over to your buyer. So if anything happens, it's his responsibility. But what do you have? You have that export declaration. X Works is complete opposite. There's no declarations. It's done by your buyer, and they load the vehicle. How many freight forwarders come into your premises and load the goods? It just doesn't happen. So you're already then avoiding the X work. So why not just use FCA and be responsible for your export declaration? That then has proof for your VAT element if you have a HMRC audit. And remember, we're going AI digital with the CDS platform that the UK has introduced and designed is a very, very good system, I must say. And everything's on there. So they'll have traceability, they'll have visual, they'll have everything. So all the data will be there. So if you're not doing things correct, it'll come back to haunt you. And DAP, delivered at place, a nice term, but again, just be conscious when you're doing delivered at place because it's your responsibility to load, arrange the vehicle with FCA and X Works, it's arranged by your buyer. DAP is the opposite. You arrange the transport and you sell the goods and then you deliver. Once you delivered, it's up to them to do the input declaration and pay any taxes. With FCA, you're responsible to do the export declaration as you are with DAP. With X Works, you're responsible for nothing. So always remember that. DAP, you're responsible to take the vehicle to arrange it. Now, a lot of people do X Works, but they arrange the transport. Well, how does that work? Because if you're doing that, then you're not using X Works, you're using DAP. Because if there's an issue, your contract is with the forwarder, unless it's with a carrier and you're using their account number, that's fine. But if you're using a freight forwarder and you're booking it and then charging the monies back to the buyer, you're literally doing DAP, you're not doing X Works. So always remember that. So again, be conscious of how you're moving goods. It's very important. Pricing power in terms change your margins. So again, if you get it right, be careful with DDP and all these other things, which we'll talk about in another slide where there's VAT elements. Understand your true cost. So what is your true cost? If you're doing FOB, you've got a cost to the port. You've got a cost to load it onto the ship. So you've got handling charges, you've got costs there. And remember, when you're dealing with a lot of the shipping lines, they may instruct that you use a particular shipping line, and it might be quite expensive to get the vehicle or for them to come and collect and take it down to their premise. They'll do it, but the big, it's quite high cost involved. So again, make sure you're building that in. If you're doing X Works, obviously it's from your door. If FCA, again, from your door. If you use FCA and you don't put where it's collection from, it's normally to the nearest port. So it could be FCA, Felix store. So if you're using somebody like in India or whatever, they'll probably back charge you the domestic transport cost, which again can be quite expensive. So again, be careful. Again, commercial impact, choosing FCA versus DAP isn't just logistics, it's fundamental aspects. Your margin, and why does it change? So people say, well, what's the difference? Well, FCA is from your factory. He will arrange the transport, so you haven't got the transport cost there. If it's DAP, you're arranging the transport. And remember, you're paying for that transport. So if you're arranging the transport, it might cost you an extra £1,000. Whereas if you're doing FCA, he's arranging the transport. You're just doing a customs declaration and entry, and that's it, and loading the vehicle. So again, just be conscious of the Incoterms. We're going to cover all the different Incoterms as we go around. So again, if you don't understand Incoterms, you can't price properly. So you've got to understand what each Incoterm plays and the cost involved. Real world consequences we see: goods stuck at borders, wronging says me wrong party handling claimants, goods sitting customs limbo while buyer, seller argue who's responsible. Demerge happens, ends up costing you a load of money. VAT zero rated, so that means that you've zero rated the goods to sell international, but you've got no record, you've got no documents to prove that. And HMRC have every right under Section 5 that they can back charge you the VAT unless you can prove it. So again, you've got to be very conscious and careful of that. Disputes over damage. So again, when goods are damaged in your contract, what have you got in that Incoterm in your contract? So who takes responsibility? If it's DAP, it's your responsibility. If it's FCA, it's the responsibility of the importer. So again, understand your disputes over damage. Unexpected duty bills, again, depending on what Incoterms you're using, again, that could come back to haunt you. But again, as long as you're using the correct terms and the risk is passed from you as a seller. And remember, in Incoterms, the seller and the buyer, when we're dealing with Incoterms, it's always based on the seller. Remember that, seller, seller, seller. So X Works sellers is passing the responsibility to the buyer. FCA, the seller is passing the responsibility over to the buyer. DAP, the seller's taking the responsibility, the buyer's just unloading the goods. So again, an Incoterm is the 11 in total, and they all have different meanings. And again, once you get your head around it, you can really play with it. So again, sales agree DAP without checking logistics capabilities, operations can't fulfill, deliver fails, customers' relationships are destroyed, all for misunderstanding what DAP requires. So what we're saying there is that you've agreed to do DAP, but you haven't got the vehicle, or you can't get a vehicle, or you can get a vehicle and it's going to cost you 10 times the amount. Already in your contract, you've agreed that you're going to sell it at this price, and then all of a sudden it's going to cost you 3 times the amount because you haven't got the flexibility of the logistics. So again, be conscious of that. It's very important. Most of these problems start with one line in contract, but create consequences that ripple through operation. I see it all the time. I can't tell you how much I've done Incoterms and the amount of mistakes that people made that are very much avoidable. Next step, know your Incoterms, know your risks. So again, the overview is introduce why Incoterms matter. Coming up next, we're going to do the experts for the FCA, we're going to do DAP, and we're going to do different Incoterms so we can get a good understanding, because it's a real clear. We do courses on it, so you should come on a course. They're only 2 hours long and they're really worth it. And you can ask questions and everything else. But we have a video as well that we do sell, which I'm just actually updating because I'm going to put a lot more sounds and a lot more other things in there so people can get a better understanding when they're looking at it. But thanks for joining us, and hopefully you enjoyed that from Export and Lots, and hopefully we'll see you on some more of our YouTube channel. So again, join us when you can with any updates, and join our newsletter, which now is about 500 people now get it at 11 o'clock. 50%, 6% are opening it. So we're getting a lot of good traction back from that. So again, if you want updated news, join the mailing list, and we'll get every day you get a newsletter with all different things within trade. Thanks for joining us.